I just want to talk some more about the Sniders and the cleaning and maintenance of them. So, way back in the late 90s when I bought my first Snider, the prevailing wisdom was that uh, black powder was highly corrosive and it would eat the barrel of your rifle. And I remember I was advised that every time I shot it, to take everything apart, take the barrel out of the stock, take the lock off, take the action to pieces, etc., etc. And if I didn't do that, then I would regret it because the gun would rot away. And black powder was so corrosive that it'll actually start to eat the barrel before I left the range. And so, I hearing all this stuff, I was still quite an impressionable teenager at the time. So I would come home. I would take the whole thing apart. I'd take the breech block out, and take the little screw out here, pull this pin, take the breech block out, take the lock off, take the screw out here, take the bands off, remove everything. And I was advised to dip the breech into a bucket of hot soapy water and pump the water up and down through the bore to dissolve the corrosive black powder fouling. And I did that for probably the first year that I had the gun, and it was starting to take its toll. Like, it was getting easier and easier to take apart. The fit was getting looser. The bands were starting to loosen up and not stay tight. And if I was causing damage to the rifle by following the advice of so-called experts. And I started to question everything. And then what I think it was Mike Venturino wrote an article and said the best way to clean black powder firearms is with this Windex that had vinegar in it. So I got that wasn't easy to find either. I had to search low and high for it, but I did find some, and so I used that for a while, and it did work really well for cleaning. But I ended up with a little bit ran out of the breech, and it ran along the butt, and one drip of that stuff running along the stock stripped it to bare wood. It took the 130-year-old finish off, and I think for the next year, every time I had time, I was applying a little bit of linseed oil with my thumb and my finger and whatever, and rubbing it, trying to make that streak disappear. I finally managed to blend it back in, but it could have made me cry when I saw what it did to the wood. So I stopped using that, and I think what happened initially, I'd gone to a shoot, and then I got called to work as soon as I got back from the shoot, and I ended up busy for the whole rest of the weekend. And I think it was about 3 or 4 days before I got to cleaning the Snider. I'd forgotten about it, and I just about had a heart attack when I realized that I hadn't cleaned it. And of course I went to check it out, and there was no rust in it at all. And so later on I got a cadet carbine that wasn't really good for shooting. Cadet carbines aren't good for shooting anyway. They weren't ever intended to, but it was safe to shoot. So I fired, I think, about 20 rounds out of it. Didn't really hit much. And I just wanted to use that for a test, so I stood that in the corner and left it for... I can't remember how long I left it. I left it for some time just to see if it would rust. And I think it was at least a month I left it sitting there. And I live in a really humid part of the country, and it never did rust. No rust ever formed at all. And the only thing that I did find was it was a little bit hard to clean after having left it for so long because the fouling had hardened up. But after that, what I started doing was just taking a wet patch at the range and pushing the fouling out, and then cleaning it up with an oily patch, and that was fine. That was all I had to do. Sometimes I'd use a Bren gun pull through. The pull through is actually nicer because it pulls the fouling from the breech and then expels it out the muzzle, so you don't end up with a bunch of gunk going into the breech. But that worked really well. And as I mentioned in my previous video, the lubricant that you use on the bullets, it goes a long way to making it easier to clean. And one of the I think where a lot of the myth of black powder fouling being highly corrosive comes from, well, there's a few things. One is that in the old days they would quite often use beef tallow in the lubricant, and beef tallow quite often has quite a bit of salt in it, and obviously if you use that, you're going to be leaving a salty residue behind in your bore. Second thing is that the priming compounds used back in the old days, starting in the percussion era, like you'll find flintlocks that have, you know, if here's a good one for you. If black powder was so highly corrosive, then how are there so many flintlocks around in such a great condition today? And the answer to that is because it wasn't highly corrosive and it was also easy to clean. So in the percussion era, though, the percussion caps were highly corrosive, and you'll quite often see on the unconverted Enfields, you'll see pitting all over in this region of the gun, and that's from the cap residue. And obviously the stuff that's going outside is also going down your bore, and it's going to cause corrosion. But the actual reality of it is black powder firearms are easier to clean than modern smokeless powder guns. You don't have to use caustic chemicals and hours of brushing and whatever trying to get them clean. You will occasionally have an issue with leading. My primary shooting Snider never leaded up at all, other than what I touched on earlier in my last video about the big ring forming in the throat. But other than that, I never had an issue with leading in the bore. So generally, it once I stopped doing the absurd thing of taking the gun apart and using soapy water, I think it maybe took 5 minutes to clean after a range session. But black powder fouling is somewhat corrosive on brass, and you can see this one was fired not by me but by somebody that sold me this brass. Was fired a long time ago with black powder and never cleaned, and you can see the pitting in it, but it's not severe, and it's actually, this is still usable brass. It's not ruined, but it does discolor it quite a bit, and you'll want to clean it. I just run it under the running. I deprime them first, obviously, and then just run it under the washroom sink tap. Just plain water is all you need. You can use soak it in that window cleaner with the vinegar in it if you want, but it's not really necessary. Just rinse them, dry them, and throw them into the case tumbler for a couple of hours, and they come out fine. And with ones that were neglected like this, what I would do is I put a 20 gauge shotgun brush on an electric drill, and then just run that into the cases, gets them nice and clean inside. But for the rifles, all you need to do, what I do with mine anyway. Not, nothing that I say is etched in stone, obviously. I'm just a person that has owned and shot these things for a long time. I'm not an expert by any means, but you can unscrew the... see if I can... need a cast iron thumb and finger to turn this here. There it comes. So you just unscrew this. This is actually the original percussion nipple converted to retain. They don't call this a firing pin either. They call it a piston in the original books. But this is getting thrown in the trash. This is some really crude piece of junk firing pin. It looks like it was made out of old scrap metal or something, and filed out with a... I don't know. It's just a really crummy firing pin. But there's also a spring inside the block. You want to fish that out. I don't know if I can grab it with the pin or not. Oh, probably need a little dental pick or something to hook that. But you want to take that out of there every so often and just run a pipe cleaner or something through it, or a small patch, and wipe the firing pin down just in case you've had priming residue coming into the breech block. And I should mention too that this has a tendency to unscrew while you're shooting, and it leads to light firing pin strikes eventually. So you want to make sure, check this about every 20 rounds or so and make sure that it's staying tight. You very rarely find them seized in, thankfully. And you can use the snap cap here to screw them in almost as a wrench. So you just turn that back in, and the other thing you want to do is lubricate the pin that the breech block slides on. Just give it a splash of ballistol, and what I used to do is take the lock off. There's only the two screws here. You loosen the screws a little bit and then give them a tap to loosen the lock out. And you want to use caution doing that too, because sometimes the lock is stuck in so tightly that I've seen them where wood is peeled out here or at the front from the tight fit. So you want to be very gentle the first time you take it out, make sure that it comes out easily. So when I first get a Snider, what I would do is remove the lock and take the entire lock to pieces and clean all the parts with a fine brass brush, and then reassemble it and lubricate it. And I would go over the edges of the lock plate as well with the brush, and then apply beeswax. Then when you put the lock plate back in, the beeswax seals everything up and keeps moisture from getting in. And after that, if you shoot it a fair amount, you should probably take the lock off and lubricate everything about maybe once a year or so. If the thing is, if you use ballistol, the ballistol never seems to dry up, so you don't have to do it as frequently. And you can take the breech block out fairly easily. You just take this screw out, you put a screwdriver blade in here to loosen that pin, then you can pull the pin out, and then the whole thing lifts off. So you can take that out and clean it up occasionally. It's not necessary, but I do that about once a year or so when I used to shoot Sniders a lot. And the same thing applies to the Martini Henry. If you shoot a Martini Henry, you want to make sure that you take that, pop the breech block out and just clean underneath it and everything. And putting a coat of the ballistol on everything ahead of time makes everything easy to clean too. So don't be discouraged. Like I know a lot of people that refuse to get into these because they say they don't want to be dealing with hot soapy water and the stink and mess of cleaning up black powder fouling, and it just isn't the case. And you'll also find, though, that Pyrodex, I wouldn't even use Pyrodex in anything anymore because Pyrodex is actually actively corrosive. I think it makes an acid or something when you shoot it. I have found that Pyrodex can cause pitting and rust. I've never had that issue with black powder. So, like I said before in my previous video, that what you want to do is make sure that you use the proper lube on your bullets, and the proper lubricant mixes with the black powder fouling and turns it into almost a black grease. And once you've done that, if you're shooting prone, you can actually see it on the ground. You can see the black grease that comes out the end of the bore with each shot. So really, when you clean, you're only basically cleaning up the fouling from one shot at that point, because the fouling has remained liquid and is being expelled with each succeeding shot. And I had great success with that. I've had no problems at all with keeping the bore clean. I never had to resort to using a blow tube or swabbing the bore or anything like that. It's all comes down to the proper type of lubricant. And like I said, this mix with the beeswax, ballistol, and canola oil is probably the best thing that I've ever found for that. I did use Thompson Center bore butter a little bit too, and that worked okay, but it wasn't really the best thing because it was so liquid that you kind of had to load your ammunition up just before going to the range, or it would end up melting off. It's better for muzzle loaders, in my opinion, which fair enough, that's what it was made for. But yeah, like I said, it very easy to clean, very easy to maintain. If it was true that the black powder fouling was so horribly corrosive and would eat everything in sight, well, these Sniders were in the hands of the militia, who, not to denigrate them or anything, but they weren't really the most highly trained force. And, they survived 30 years in their hands without disintegrating. So, you just have to look at the actual facts rather than listening to people that perpetuate myths. But I recommend getting this kind of this is it's got cat fur on it. My cat stepped on it earlier. But this is that's for 577 bore, and it screws right onto any standard 30 caliber rod. And that's what I've used for many years for cleaning. I wish I knew who made that. It's a really handy attachment. But I highly recommend getting one of those, and like I said, you can use any 30 caliber rod with that. And I think I already plugged this book, Defending the Dominion. Highly recommend you buy one, especially if you're going to get a Snider. I only wish that they'd had books like that when I was getting into these. There was no literature out on them at all. I didn't have internet at the time. Even if I did, I don't think there was really anything pertaining to these on the internet. And there was very, very little information available on them. All you could get was the expensive Skennerton book. which covered some of the history. But I think even at the time that was like $90 and hard to find. And there were two little pamphlets by Charles Purdon. And yeah, there wasn't very much information in those. But now you have books like this available. You have websites. It's just it's a really good time to get into these now, in my opinion. It's just like everything is just more available now. There's more information out there, but just the sad part about it is that so many of the Sniders that are out there right now are those crummy Nepalese ones. And it's surprising how many of them have actually turned up in Canada. I can't believe people here buy them. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, we have the best supply of Sniders anywhere in the world here, and here people will buy these Nepalese knockoffs, and then they'll go out and shoot them, and the cases get stuck in the chamber, and the bores are bored off center, and they just have nothing but trouble with them. And then the Snider ends up getting a bad rap because of that. Anyway, I just wanted to make a quick video and tell you how I used to clean these and whatever, and hopefully sometime this year, if I have time and the weather permits, we'll be able to go out and actually shoot them, and I can show you how to shoot them and clean them firsthand. I'm kind of looking forward to trying them out sometime. Well, that's all for now. If you have any questions or anything, just leave a comment, and I'll try to answer it for you.